Hello, students. We are up to Chapter 13 in our semester, and we only have one more to go after this. But continue to apply the concepts from this chapter and Chapter 14 to your paper. Chapter 13 is all about subcultures. Pretty interesting chapter. So let's break down what we mean by subcultures. It is a group whose members share significant beliefs and common preferences, which is why you did your field exercise on an immigrant that you could speak to belonging to a particular culture and what that meant to them with regard to foods that they purchase or behavior. Now that they're in America, do they hold on to their old beliefs and kind of blend them together with our beliefs here in the United States? So some of the statistics around the subculture in the United States is that over the next 45 years, the Hispanic population is expected to more than double. The Asian population is also expected to double, but not at the high rate as Hispanics. And many marketers are, of course, aware of these changes. McDonald's, for example, uses a strategy called leading with ethnic insights. And Ford Explorer also markets to African Americans very successfully. Some companies very much have adapted and understand who this audience is and who it will be in the future. So there are subculture stereotypes. Our membership in ethnic, racial, and subcultures often guide our consumption choices. So interestingly enough, when you interviewed a friend and asked them about their choices, their food choices, and even in the very beginning of the semester when we talked about if you had your last meal to choose, what would it be? And depending on where people are from and what their culture is, a lot of people go back to their roots. And it's just the way it is. It's our comfort zone. Subculture and gender stereotypes continued. So outsiders may assume that group members possess certain traits. Okay, that's called stereotyping. And just because you are, for instance, I'll pick on my own ethnic group. I am Irish and Scottish. So Irish people are known for St. Patrick's Day and drinking, whereas I'm also Scottish, and it turns out that Scots are very much considered a frugal group of people, sometimes cheap. But it doesn't mean everybody's like that. So I picked on my own group, and you all know what people think about your ethnic group, and it's not always your subculture. It could also be, like we said, gender stereotypes as well, even your age group. In the past, it was common for marketers to use racial, sexist, and ethnic symbolism as a shorthand to convey certain product attributes. Before these actions became taboo, they often employed crude and unflattering images of Mexicans, African Americans. So I'm going to show you a few of those depictions in marketing. Quite frankly, it's kind of embarrassing, and I have taught courses on this before. So let's take a look at some of those. So examples of subculture and gender stereotypes. They'd have, in the past, they would have, and they have updated. So on the left-hand side here, I have Aunt Jemima, and then I also have the cream of wheat. And then over here, they've updated it a little bit where it's not like this subservient stereotype. And then far right here is it's called Injun Orange flavor. And it is a Kool-Aid type product that they'd use. And there is a commercial that I have coming up that you could take a look at in a link that really was used in the past in such a tasteless way. And thank God things have changed. Okay, so Frito-Lay stopped these ads in 1971, but take a little look at this. This is the Frito Bandito, and using him as this crazy guy selling snack products. So take a look at this, and again, stereotyping, a shortcut for people not realizing how offensive that it was. And this was 1971, not that long ago. So what is acculturation? Okay, this is what I've been talking about in your project that I noticed. Or I should say field exercise, is the process of movement and adaptation to one's country's cultural environment by a person from another country. So acculturation occurs with influencers and agents teach us the way of the culture. So maybe some of your parents or grandparents that you described in the field exercise, they really kind of hang on to some of their old traditions, whether it's cooking or behaviors. And because as time goes on, living in a country for a certain amount of time, I know a lot of you also said that some of your friends, cousins, family members have adapted to American society and fast food and different availabilities we have, at least in relation to mealtime. So acculturation occurs with influencers or agents that teach us the way of the culture. So family, friends, the media, certainly church organizations. So there is an assimilation or a resistance, and marketers need to be aware of this change. So an assimilation is I just kind of assimilate and go along with this new culture that I'm in, or a lot of you kind of let me know that some of your grandparents or cousins or aunts and uncles kind of resisted some of the ways of America and some of the shortcuts we take, maybe with food prep and processed foods and things like that. So here's a great example of what I mean by acculturation. So Disney's newest princess is Elena of Avalor, and this is a great place for Latina girls to look and see and identify with someone in the Disney Princess collection. They did not have anyone really to identify with before, and now this is a way for Disney to connect with their audience and this new growing audience. More on acculturation. So high contact culture means that these are group members, that are tightly knit. They infer meanings that go beyond the spoken word. Symbols and gestures carry the weight of the message. Many minority cultures fall into this group. So Hispanic, African American, Asian, very tight-knit, family-oriented group of people. Low context culture is more literal, straightforward messaging. So you can see this chart I have down here. So high context cultures are Great Britain, Southern Europe, Middle Eastern, Asia, Africa, Latin America, Japan. And somewhere the combo is Belgium, Holland, France, and Sweden. Low context on the other side is West Germany, German, Swiss, Scandinavian, and North American, of course. Here's an example of a company, Home Depot, that segments their campaigns. I'm sure you've seen these kinds of signs at places like Walmart and other places that create different ads for acculturated Hispanics. So you know what? We know that it's a kitchen, but it's also a cucina's. They also have different ads here on the left-hand side showing Santa in the background. The sad thing is I took Spanish many years ago. I could figure it out, what they're trying to say here, but keep up with your Spanish kids. Okay, so progressive learning model. Okay, this assumes that people gradually learn a new culture as they increasingly come in contact with it. I would say that's true. So think about that. You assume that people gradually learn a new culture as they increasingly come in contact with it. When people acculturate, they will blend their original culture with the new host culture. So it's kind of a combination of things. Acculturation can occur when we relocate from one place to another in our own country. And so we try to think about, how do we cope with these feelings? Some of you told me that your grandparents or some of your parents still go to like Spanish stores, food stores that have accommodate their ingredients for different recipes, because a Publix is not going to do that for you. They have a very small international section, so to speak. But I think it's pretty interesting also when we talk about moving from one place to another in our country. So obviously, as you all know, I'm from the Northeast, and how do I cope with moving down here? Because I have these like feelings of missing my family and things like that, or even the seasons. So we might do different things that help us cope. It could be some type of food we make that gives us kind of that comfort level. The time it hits me the most is probably the fall, which was my favorite time of year, when it gets a little cool and crisp out and you're going to rake leaves, have a fire, pumpkin picking, apple picking, kind of that fall feeling, which I don't have here. And it has hit me 2 years in a row since I've been here for 2 falls now. And I'm trying to think of other things that would help me connect. So I make this like apple cider, and I try to stay indoors where it's cool because when it's hot out, that just deflates the whole feeling down here. So I'm going to have to come up with some other coping skills for that time of year. Otherwise, most of the time I'm pretty good with not missing that cold weather. Okay, moving on. Consumers who retain much of their original ethnic identity differ from those who assimilate. Okay, so as I said, a lot of your family members that have not really assimilated might still have kind of negative attitudes towards businesses, access more media that's more in their native language, Telemundo, things like that, that they don't want to adapt, basically. They like right where they are. And it's also why we have different segments, even in New York, where you have Little Italy and Chinatown. And even in New York, Philadelphia, they also do that, where Italians congregate in one area, African Americans do, Asian culture tends to stay together. So they just don't want to change. They like that comfort zone. This group is definitely brand loyal. They prefer brands with prestige labels, and they buy brands that specifically advertise to their ethnic group. So the picture I have down here on the right is from Goya. And Goya is a company that I buy some items from, but certainly the Hispanic community definitely connects, and they want to. They still have a lot of the labels in Spanish, and it's a comfort zone, and it's a familiarity that this group might connect with. So think about that when you're, as a marketer. Is ethnicity a moving target? So defining and targeting an ethnic group is not always easy, because we try to say that America is a melting pot, but there is de-ethnization. Okay, it occurs when a product we associate with a specific ethnic group. For instance, I have bagel is a staple of the Jewish cuisine, but it detaches itself from its roots and appeals to other groups. So obviously they're green for St. Patrick's Day. Is that working? So that's called de-ethnization. And, it happens a lot, especially in our country where we are trying to be a melting pot and connect with everybody. The big three American ethnic subcultures. Okay, so we're going to break these down. First, number one is African Americans. They make up 13% of the U.S. population. Their spending patterns of blacks and whites are roughly similar. So from a marketer's perspective, that's good to know. Household income and educational levels are rising for African Americans, And their differences in consumption behaviors are subtle, but they're important. When you're a marketer, you need to know what those subtleties are. Here's an example of a show Disney has created called Doc McStuffins, and it is likes to reflect what the diversity is in our society, but it also helps to connect with um, African Americans, especially children who want to see something that looks like them on television. And this is a great opportunity for Disney to connect. Examples of niche marketing. So here are some companies that have connected with the African American community. One here is the Ford Explorer campaign. Please check it out. It's Hart is in this, and he is funny, and he's at a wedding ceremony, and he's promoting the Ford Explorer. But it's a great way to use celebrity that people like and connects with that audience. Okay, Procter & Gamble also has a My Black is Beautiful campaign, and you can see the logo here on the right hand side. Check out these YouTube videos. Just because I'm not showing them to you in class, these will help you connect with the concepts when it comes to applying it to your paper and applying it for the quiz and understanding, what I mean when I talk about niche marketing in particular cultural settings. So the My Black is Beautiful campaign is Procter & Gamble has connected with this community because they're understanding that there is a deeper meaning in the color of a woman's skin, and it tells a story of who they are and identifies with them. And whether you're lighter skin or darker skin, and what does that mean in the African American community. So another great example of a company that's working to connect with their audience. And because it is the mushroom capital of the world, next to California, there is a high concentration of Puerto Ricans and Mexicans that live in that area. They do a lot of the farming and picking of the mushrooms and cultivating and in that particular area, which, like I said, is a very, very small city near the city I grew up in. And they do a lot of different marketing to this particular area due to the fact that they are highly concentrated, which is unusual. So for instance, there is a Spanish Mass for the Catholic Church that they offer. Many different types of Latin retailers with foods that Hispanics typically cook with and are loyal to. So that's a very small example of understanding the demographics in an area and not ignoring them. Distinguishing characteristics of the Hispanic market. Okay, if any of you fall into this category, I think you may agree. They are looking for spirituality, strong family ties, and they like a lot of color in their lives. They're from larger families. They spend more on groceries. They shop as a family affair. They regard clothing children well, and it is a matter of pride. Convenience and saving time is not important to Hispanic homemakers, and looking at themselves as ambicultural, which means in the middle of Latino and American. So, wow, that's a lot of information there for a marketer to understand. You know what? They spend a lot of money on groceries, and it's more of an event when they go grocery shopping. A group of people. Plus, they do have a lot of pride in themselves and what they're wearing. So again, as a clothing manufacturer, how are people promoting their products to the Hispanic market? And the fact that cutting corners and processed foods and things like that, not of interest. They like there's a joy in the journey of cooking. And the fact that they look at themselves in the middle of Latino and American, that's like, a tight wire to walk and understand. So here's a great example of how corporations are avidly going after the Hispanic consumer. Kohl's, for instance, offers a clothing line by Jennifer Lopez. Um, Macy's just launched a clothing line with Thalia Sodi, I get that wrong. And Walmart has a new denim collection launched by Sophia. Oh gosh, what is her name? Why am I not remembering it? You know who she is from the the Family Show. I can't remember at this time, but you know who she is. Very popular woman, and you know what? This is great. This is showing strong Hispanic women. And if you noticed, even at the Super Bowl this year, you're down in Miami, and who are our entertainers, right? Two strong uh, Hispanic women that, put on a show. So advertising blunders. This is kind of one of my favorite things because many years ago when people weren't paying attention, I guess, they weren't really looking at how things translate from one thing to another. And now we have very much, like we said, niche marketing going on where we bring in, companies that understand what things translate into, and they are specifically go after particular niche markets. So, for instance, the Got Milk campaign in Spanish translated to Are You Lactating? Budweiser was the queen of beers. So companies bumbled in their efforts to translate advertising adequately and compose copy that captured the nuances. That's a big word, okay? The nuances advertisers intended. So there's things that go on in every community that, it's hard to connect with unless you're actually from that community. So ad agencies specifically for Hispanic consumers, here is an example of one. Please open up this website, but it's an example of an ad agency that specifically goes after that Hispanic consumer. As I said, nobody's taking any risks anymore. Why not connect and understand the nuances, that unspoken word that connects with the Hispanic consumer? Okay, Hispanics, more on Hispanics because there's so much to talk about. They resemble the idealized concept of the 1950s America. They've been compared to them. Okay, so on the right hand side, you have, mom working at home, dad goes out to his job, the kids are all dressed up at the dinner table for some reason. The picket fence, the family time. Notice there's no cell phones. Then we look to the left and we see that Hispanics they're a young group of consumers. They're moving to the suburbs. They live in large traditional families, married with children and grandparents in tow. The grandparents are always included in all the events, which I think is wonderful. They're community oriented. They have high aspirations for their children. They eat their meals together. They consume less alcohol on average. So if we look at what the 1950s America looked like, there is some resemblances and interesting comparison. Okay, number 3, Asian Americans, 20 different ethnic groups, okay? When we say Asian American. So you think Hispanic's big, Asian American is much bigger. So they're very affluent, okay? They're best educated. They're brand conscious, but they're least brand loyal. They're made up of culturally diverse subgroups that speak many different languages and have different dialects. So it's Mandarin, Korean, Japanese, and Vietnamese. So ethnic groups, Chinese, Filipino, Japanese, to name a few. They're concentrated in areas like LA, New York, and San Francisco. They too have an emphasis on family, grandparents, aunts and uncles, sometimes living together, and they're twice as likely to live with other family members than the average American. Average American tends to take the elderly and put them into an assisted living or homes versus these cultural groups we speak of, that is kind of like a no-no. Everybody stays together. So remember, these are just kind of stereotypes about these ethnic groups, and stereotypes aren't always negative, okay? It means that what are some commonalities of this group? And from a marketer's perspective, what does all this boil down to? And how can you direct your messages to this group of people? So open these YouTube videos up and take a look at them and see what you think is different. But similar mistakes have been made connecting with this audience as well, that were just examples that I'm going to give you here. Coke. Slogan, Coke adds life, translated to Coke brings your ancestors back from the dead in Japanese. That's not going to sell any Coke. And then Kentucky Fried Chicken is finger licking good, but in the Japanese or Asian culture, it's not polite in Chinese to lick your fingers. So again, not understanding the nuances in a particular culture, you end up in the advertising blunder bin. Okay, so religion and consumption. Okay, so this is also another interesting area. Organized religion and product choices used to be taboo. So using anything to do with organized religion in advertising was never allowed. Okay, religious dietary restrictions and dress requirements create a demand for products. Okay, I'll say that again. Religious dietary restrictions and dress requirements create a demand for products. Okay, so here I have kosher products for holidays, Jewish holidays, and then I also have the good old fillet of fish up here that are always starting to promote themselves on Fridays for Lent in the Catholic religion. So marketers need to be aware of all of these holidays and restrictions so that they can connect with their audience. Islamic marketing, a new and emerging market. Halal foods are appealing to the mainstream. So that, again, what's trending, what's emerging. As marketers, we need to know this. We're not to ignore it. We are to embrace it and understand what are the next trends that are coming. Okay, so for reflection, if we were in the class, I'd want you to think of an example of a product that's marketed based on religious consumption. I gave my example of the fillet of fish and then the kosher foods during Jewish holidays. So think about that. Think about your own life and how certain religious consumption is an opportunity for marketers. Okay, we did talk about this in your field assignment. Discuss the changes in Modern Family, what advertisers are picking up on these changes. We're going to talk more about this in the slides ahead, but basically you guys did a great job in picking up changes, whether it be same-sex parents, if you were saying single-family households or single-parent households, more technology in the home. So that was kind of a different twist on the Modern Family and how advertisers are working around that. We also talked about dadvertising, and more dads are doing that are at home and they're caregivers. Let's see, just a busy modern household. Trying to think other ones you guys came up with. Well, we'll talk about it more in these slides and it will prompt me to remember some. So in 2026, there's supposed to be a big birth dearth. So that can affect a lot of companies that are selling to parents, selling to children, and what does that look like? So this next slide, I'll show you coming up. Think about what companies would be affected by that. So the family life cycle, factors that determine how couples spend money. So if a couple has children, they're going to be spending money in certain times of the child's life, whether it's, coming into this world, and needing all the whole setup for a brand new baby, whether it be a crib or other baby oriented products for your home. Or if you don't have children, what are you spending your money on? Maybe more disposable income equals more adult kind of vacations and cars and things that are more kind of for that middle-aged person that has that disposable income and can spend it on themselves. And what does that look like? Whether both spouses work, that makes a difference, where you have double income and more disposable income. There's the letters FLC, and it's called the family life cycle. Okay, these are the concept combines trends in income and family composition with a change in demands placed on income. So let me read that again. Family life cycle concept. This concept combines trends in income and family composition with the change in demands placed on income. So things such as, having a baby, getting married, death, moving, retirement. These are all different life events or stages in our lives that lead to spending or not spending. Back to that birth dearth we were talking about. In 2018, the United States experienced the fewest number of births in 32 years, making it 10 of the past 11 years that births have declined. Okay, so births are declining, and think of who's being affected by that. So in the short run, companies like, diaper companies and baby food. But then as they move up the line here, you have things like McDonald's and their Happy Meals. But what about colleges? There's expecting a decline, because less people in the market means there's less people consuming things like education and food products and life stage products. Okay, marketing opportunity. So almost 1/3 of all U.S. households own a pet. I'm included. I've got 2 dogs and a cat. What do you have? Okay, 92% of those owners consider their pet a member of the family. Pretty much true. Our dog Lola seems to run the household here. She pretty much chews up everything. We bought her 3 crates. She's chewed through 2. Now she's in a more sturdy one. We've got dog treats. We've had dog beds. We have leashes. We have collars. I mean, what we've spent on her since we got her in October? Not to mention the other dog I have, who's an older dog, but he's on a lot of medications. So they're members of my family. You may feel the same way. But this industry is a $40 billion industry. Because of all the stuff I just mentioned, you probably are spending the same as well. On places like Chewy.com, I mean, every single retailer, if they're smart, has a pet section, from IKEA to Home Depot to TJ Maxx to Publix. And then you have your pet depots and things like that that actually are just focused on pets. So marketers are definitely seizing this opportunity to the point of I'm finding more pet stuff than I am children's stuff. Even the FAU bookstore, the pet section is as big as the baby section. And I guess rightly so. Variables affecting the family life cycle: age, marital status if you're single. This could mean an established household together. Okay, children in the home, and then ages of children in the home. So your family life cycle is either slower or faster depending on all of these variables. Okay, so we have many things in common with others because they're about the same age. Okay, so this is called an age cohort. I want you to think about this with regard to your project and your target audience. It consists of people of similar ages who have similar experiences, common memories, common cultural icons, and historical events. So think about how marketers target to certain age cohorts. So you're doing that a little bit with what you're finding out about your age cohort, whether it's Gen Z or baby boomers. Why do they purchase seafood? Why don't they? What are the deciding factors? And how can you help marketers understand this age cohort? So I always think of age groups, a lot of times when I think of like high school. So I think if someone was in high school with me, we have a lot more in common with music and social experiences and common memories in that way. And, who was popular, whether it be a celebrity or an event that went on. Not that it's not longer than the 4 years of high school, but you'll find this out, or maybe you have already, that people that are around the same age certainly get it. They get jokes, they get a lot of stuff. So let's break these generations down. Again, this is a perfect chapter to use as a shout out for your seafood project. So we didn't talk about this, a couple of these generations, but they're the interbellum generation born at the beginning of the 20th century. There's a few of them still alive today. Okay, moving on. So children, consumers in training, and this is true because, young children have a lot of, I want to say, leverage over their parents these days. I'm sure many of you have seen small kids with tablets in their hands and all kinds of technology, sometimes when they're sitting in a stroller. So that's why they're calling them consumers in training. Okay, parental yielding. When a parent surrenders to the child's request, the kid that's screaming in the grocery store? Guess what? That may have been me giving out a cookie to make you be quiet. So 90% of these requests are for brand specific items. Children directly influence over $453 billion worth of a family's purchase in a year. Okay? So if they know a brand name cereal or a brand name yogurt or a brand name game or clothing, guess what? 90% of these requests are very specific. Marketers, I have makers here. I want to say marketers. Marketers are aware of this influence, and we create campaigns around this statistic, sometimes using what we call a nag factor, where the kid is asking for something and the parents just give in. This happens sometimes in advertising, or one of the things I see a lot of is that the child knows better than the parent. Like they're very impatient with the parent and the lack of knowledge a parent has. I think there's a PetSmart commercial out right now where the mother wants to get an appointment for the dog and the daughter is sitting on the couch and pretty much is on her phone and makes the appointment in 20 seconds. But you can tell that she's just, annoyed with her mother's lack of knowledge. So this is like a common thread for advertisers. Gen Y and Gen Z, they have 4 basic conflicts are common among all teens. Okay, so if we say certain things in an age group that continue to happen over and over again, it's what we call like teenage angst. So there's an autonomy versus belonging. They want to be independent. They want to get away from the parent. Okay. Some other commonalities is there's a rebellion versus conformity, wanting to be different, idealism versus pragmatism, which is adults thinking that adults are hypocritical, and then narcissism versus intimacy, obsessed with ourselves, kind of constantly taking pictures and letting people know every little thing that we're doing. So there are some basic conflicts that teens or young adults have, and as you can see, marketers, which you all are and will be soon, we try to pick up on these common threads of teenagers and young adults if you are marketing to them, so that you go and connect with them on their level. But understanding this information is what's most important to marketers. Okay, getting to know Gen Z. So all of you are Gen Z in my class. You're born in the late 90s to the early 2000s. You are the most diverse generation. You are digital natives, and you grew up during the Great Recession. So you have a certain perspective of our life in a different way at a different time. And you know what? This will also be part of your history as well, going through this virus. So getting to know Gen Y. So Gen Y are echo boomers or millennials, and sometimes they're called Gen Yers. So they have a few names to them: millennials, Gen Yers. They make up 1/3 of the U.S. population, spending $170 billion a year, give or take. Grew up with computers in their homes in a 500-channel TV universe. Connexity is a lifestyle of being footloose yet being connected. 3 things shape them: the economy, they're overeducated and underpaid; globalization, so they are very much eager to experience cultures; and social media. So they have a lot of things that have shaped who millennials are. And hopefully whoever has this as an audience is finding similar information in your secondary research. Gen Xers, consumers born between 66 and, this isn't right. Yeah, 66 and 76. So there's 46 million Americans. Today, Gen Xers are both value-oriented and values-oriented. Desire stable families, save a portion of your income, view home as an expression of individuality. The thought of as what they call the forgotten generation between baby boomers and millennials. And this is my generation, so I definitely agree with that kind of forgotten generation. But interestingly enough, during this virus and this crisis that we're going through, Gen Xers are getting a lot of accolades because we're used to being that group of people that maybe parents weren't always, over our shoulder. We had a lot of freedom to do our own thing. We were the first latchkey kids, as they'd call us. It was when divorce was more rampant, so there was a single family or single parent home. But there's been a few different stories about Gen Xers and how they're handling this social distancing, and that we felt, and I agreed in the articles I've read, that this is not unusual for us, that we make the best of what the situation is and keep ourselves busy. So I was happy to see those articles for once about our forgotten generation. Okay, so baby boomers continue to be the most powerful age segment economically. So, something to consider, whoever has baby boomers, this is who they are. They were born between 46 and 64, but there's 2 separate groups, okay? The early ones were more involved with Vietnam and civil rights, okay? And the later ones are, the oldest one, or youngest one, I think, is in their mid 50s now. They're active and physically fit, currently in peak earning years. Food, apparel, retirement programs. They're going through that midlife crisis. They're eating healthier, okay? Hello, seafood business. There's a big market around seniors. I mean, we all know this, especially being down here in Florida, where many have their second homes. A lot of retirement, 55 plus communities going up, tourism, cosmetic surgery, skin treatments, exercise, cruises. I mean, we could go on and on. What they don't talk about necessarily here is think about the food market, and think about seafood and thinking about eating better and cholesterol and protein and thinking about our health. So this is a prime target for seafood consumption in my eyes. Okay, perceived age. You're only as old as you feel. So another thing marketers need to consider is just because someone's a certain age doesn't mean they're their mother's version of whatever that age was. So they always say, 60 is the new 50, 50 is the new 40. So age is more a state of mind than it is your body. So perceived age is how old a person feels as opposed to his or her chronological age. So there's an age that you feel, and then there's called the age that you look. So certainly looking in the mirror, people of a certain age group are going to see a few more wrinkles, some gray hair, things that weren't like they used to be, but it doesn't mean they don't feel a certain way inside. So the older we get, the younger we feel relative to our actual age. So as marketers, you need to consider that, okay? So this is called consumer identity renaissance. Revitalize previous identity or pursuit of a lifelong dream. So think of that in terms of baby boomers and older, and maybe a little bit of Gen Xers. They have more free time, they have more disposable income, and they're doing some things that they always wanted to do. It could be going back to school, getting more physically fit, taking a painting class, taking a dancing class, traveling more, cooking more. Who knows? But this is like a renaissance, or sometimes we have things called bucket lists. I don't like to call it bucket lists, but this is something to consider as a marketer. One of the fun things I like to see, especially in Boca, is the feel your age, look your age. Certainly some people have taken it to another level with some of the outfits I've seen around Boca, whether it be at the mall or whatever, but sometimes it's okay to just say that you're of a certain age. I'm not saying you have to be old and granny looking, but then there's like, you're actually like rivaling, a teenage girl sometimes, these women in their 60s and 70s, in some of the things I've seen them wear. So I know you know what I'm talking about. You've seen them around. Okay, so values of older adults. Okay, we talked about the younger adults, that the Gen Zers and the millennials. The values of an older adult is that they want to be self-sufficient. They want to stay connected with their families and friends, which is why Facebook is a huge, easy way to connect with baby boomers and above, and Gen Xers. Altruism, they want to give back to the world. Again, there's that, I have extra time on my hands, I want to give back. I have a lot to give back because a lot of them may be retired, but they were CEOs of their companies and very knowledgeable, and they want to be on boards and give back to their communities. So place-based subcultures. Okay, we talked a little bit about this before. This is our last slide, but this is called geodemography, and this is combining a date on consumer expenditures and other social economic factors with geographic factors. Okay, so you think about where you're living and what your socioeconomic situation is. So we think of things called birds of a feather flock together. I said that before. So there's all pockets of like-minded people throughout the United States, whether it's religious, your culture, or it could be your age, it could be your socioeconomic situation or a blurring of all those things. So we think of Florida and retirees, okay? Pockets of like-minded people who want to be in nice weather in a community where they can grow old together, okay? Zip codes are a great way for marketers to target their audiences. So I brought this up before in class, I'm sure, where if you go to a retailer and they ask you what your zip code is, zip codes have been used to basically categorize people. You know, what is their socioeconomic background? What is their ethnic background? I know the census is going around right now for 2020. That's a great way to get information as well, to see who's where and how to market to them. So, for instance, if you're in Wellington, like I am, you're pocketing community-based people. It's a mid to upper class area, very equestrian-based, clearly people that own farms, horses, ride horses, some retirees. So this is a certain zip code. How do you market to that zip code versus people that live down in Boca or people that live across the state in, like, you know, Fort Myers, something like that. So there's a lot of information out there that's called, again, geodemography, combining that data of consumer expenditures, their socioeconomic background with their where they're living. And it can be very powerful for marketers to understand that information. Okay, so we have one more chapter left. One more quiz. Yes. One more quiz left, I believe. And then we have your class project in your group. You need to continue to work together. You need to get a conference call with me if you haven't already. Make sure you're going in the right direction. You should be working on your interview questions now. 2 per person in your group with the same questions, drawing conclusions, seeing patterns, and offering suggestions to the seafood board. So I will leave you at that, and we will reconnect again on chapter 14, our last chapter.